Dina, thanks so much for being here. What is a social psychologist?
Well, a social psychologist is different from a clinical psychologist in that we don't study neuroses and psychoses and people with personal problems. We stand back a little and look at the ways people are influenced. Everything from how you learn to how you're persuaded, how you're manipulated, how you're coerced, even how you're brainwashed. And we do a lot of experimentation on how that can happen, how you can actually manipulate and maneuver things and get people to change their beliefs and their behaviors, especially when it can be done without alerting them that you're actually actively manipulating them.
What
So
got you interested in social psychology?
um, I was studying psychology as a general topic as an undergraduate and took a social psychology class and just fell in love with it. I thought it was fantastic. So I kept going all the way through and got my doctorate.
And tell us where you grew up and what that was like.
I'm a military kid. I'm known as a brat. So my father was in the army when I was growing up. So I lived quite a few places, including going to high school in Germany. And then I went back to New York and stayed there for a while. Got married, had a baby, decided to go back to university, and 9 years later, I graduated.
Did you like living in Europe?
I loved it. In fact, living in Germany, we lived there for 3 years, and then my dad got transferred back to the States to New York. He's not from there, none of us are, but that's where they sent him. And I really wanted to get back to Europe. So when I left for college, rather than looking for a college in the States, I went to the American College in Paris. So I went and lived in Paris for a while.
It's a tough life. That must have been that must have been a good
Well,
a
I
good
mean,
place to
I was a
spend some of
broke
your youth.
student, so it's not quite the same as go there with enough money to go to all the fabulous restaurants and things, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was absolutely phenomenal.
I think Paris and New York are both cities where they're great with a lot of money and they're great with no money as well. You can scrounge your way along the banks of the Seine or along the East River and still have a blast. So where did you end up studying? You went to Stanford for social psychology?
Yes, for my master's and my doctorate. I went to City University, Hunter College in New York for my undergrad. I started at the American College, but I didn't finish. And then I went back to the States, and then I went to Hunter College, and I did finish then. And I decided I was going to go for graduate school to whatever university was rated number one that year. U.S. News and World Report rates the universities in the United States. There are about 28,000 of them. They rate them every year. So I said, whichever one is number one, that's where I'm going.
Tell us what university life was like. Did you find it welcoming? There's a whole conversation going on at the moment about campuses going crazy and being super woke and, the old establishment professors in having run-ins with students who are coming in who want to run things their way. What was it like while you were there?
Well, it was interesting because the wokeism was there, but it was more underground. Um, in fact, I ended up having to replace one of the professors that was on my committee for my doctorate because she didn't like the topic that I chose for my doctorate. I had worked on a landmark study of homeless and formerly homeless and at-risk families. And I suspected that being on welfare, being dependent on the government, would have an impact on how people live their lives, how they thought, their relationships. And so I decided to study that for my doctoral thesis. And one of my professors was very woke and said I wasn't supposed to look at welfare. I was supposed to just leave that alone. I told her I was a social scientist. There was nothing that was off limits. And I ended up having to replace her.
Wait, what's the thinking about not studying homelessness? I don't even understand the
No, no,
logic.
not homelessness, welfare.
Sorry, welfare?
She didn't want me to look at welfare because there's a disproportionate number of Black people on welfare.
Ah,
No, she was white and I'm Black. She didn't want me to look at it.
right. She's telling you how to be a good Black person.
Yes, again, we had some of that there. I personally thought you can't fix anything if you don't really know what you're looking at. So I went ahead and studied it, and I see why she was worried. There was not just a statistically significant impact of being on welfare, it was a dramatic impact. It had a very dramatic, detrimental impact on people's lives.
Welfare did.
Yes,
Is that because of how it was delivered and how the system was managed?
absolutely. I mean, all the rules from, from the well-meaning pre-woke back in the 1960s who decided to make it easy for poor women to get welfare, and you had generation after generation of poor urban people brought up with no fathers in the house because one of the rules was you could not have a man in the house if you were going to receive welfare. So you have all of these children with no fathers and the detriment of having no father. Also, getting money without having to work for it, it gives you no sense of purpose. It makes you highly dependent. I found the people that were on welfare compared to an equally impoverished population who actually had jobs, but they just had low paying jobs. They had stronger relationships with their families. They had stronger friendships. They had more hope for the future. It was not a good thing.